Within this presentation, I want to talk about three interconnected ideas. Remember that triangulation idea? I want to talk about the structure of the sentences, so how we write our sentences. I want to talk about how we integrate references within those sentences, and I want to talk about the words which we use to support that structure and therefore the writing style. And in doing this, we're going to explore this idea of academic robustness, referencing, accurate language, and signaling words. Just a normal disclosure, remember these videos are here to give a very simple understanding of a topic, and you should always discuss the ideas which I present in these videos with the person who is marking your work. At the end of the day, they will be awarding you the marks, not me, and they may want you to do it slightly differently. So always check. The first topic I want to very quickly cover is referencing or in-text citation within the main body. If we get this right, everything else becomes easier. Okay, Harvard referencing within the main block of text, so in-text referencing or citation. Even though most of you are in your final year of your undergraduate degree, probably writing your final year dissertation, some of you may be doing your MSc dissertation, but I still come across students who are struggling with Harvard referencing. So I'll put this slide in just to make sure we're all starting from the same position. The three sentences on the screen are three different examples of using the same reference or the same citation. The first one, James examines the claims that the moon is square. Can you see or hear that I just read that sentence, but I missed out 2020 and PG24 because that's inside the brackets. When the person is reading that sentence and we're using Harvard referencing, it says do not read what's inside the brackets when we're talking about the citation. So it says James examines the claims that the moon is square. And we can illustrate that a little bit more in the next sentence where it says it has been argued that the moon is square. Because James 2020 and PG24 are all inside the brackets, it says do not read. And then just to illustrate the point that the reference or citation can come at the beginning, middle, end of the sentence. The third and final sentence, it has been argued that the moon is square. Now, just to be really clear, can I just highlight, I'll just make a red mark here. Can we see on that third sentence, the last one, the full stop goes after the citation. That's really important because the citation is part of the sentence. So it must go before the full stop. Otherwise, it's part of the next sentence, in which case your reference is wrong and you're going to lose marks. So the take-home message from the slide is, if you are citing a journal paper or book and it's inside brackets, the reader does not read that out loud. But if it's outside the brackets, the reader does. So sentence 1, James is outside the bracket, so it would be James examines. And remember that the citation goes before the full stop. What I want to talk about now is that writing style, so the words which we're using, the citation, so that Harvard referencing, and how they come together to help us structure a nice academic and robust sentence. The first example I want to talk about is the use of according to. Every year I tell students not to use the words according to, and every year students do it. And every year I tell students if you use according to throughout the literature review for your dissertation, I will reduce your mark down, probably down to a pass level, because you're not showing academic robustness. That idea of wider reading and deeper understanding of the text, the journals and books which you are engaging with. Essentially, if I see the words according to, it tells me that you haven't understood what that journal or book is about, what that author is trying to transfer to you, that implicit knowledge. It just says, I've read this and I know it's something about the moon being round. It's also a common trait you see, or characteristics you see, in international writers. So students who are writing English as a second or third language often use this term according to. And you see it in published research as well, where people, academics who are publishing, maybe they live in India, but they're publishing it in a English spoken or English written journal. They often write with the words according to. So it sends a very clear message to me as your marker is, I've read this paper or book. I don't really understand what the person's talking about, but I know he's talking about the moon is round. Instead of writing according to, you need to write a specific word: examines, investigates, identifies, explores, and so on and so forth. So the better way of writing this sentence would be, James examines the claims that the moon is square. So James is not saying the moon is square, he is examining, looking at the reasons for the claims around the moon is square. And that's using a very specific word to give a very clear message. And that's where the higher marks will come from, because it shows that you've understood what James is doing within his book or paper. He's examining the facts, he's looking at what people have said and trying to work out if the claim is true or false. So that word examine is really important. So the key takeaway message from the slide is, do not use the words according to, rather use specific words as demonstrated in the second sentence, like examines, investigate, explores. The second example I want to talk about is, again, every year I see this. The student uses the word shows. So they start off the sentence really well: author, date, and then this word shows. It's the type of word you use in primary school, or low grade GCSE in high school. It's so general. It's like saying the car drove past the house. Well, which car are you talking about? We need to be really specific, really accurate with the words which we're using within our academic writing. So if you give me a literature review in your final year project and it says shows all the way through, again, your marks are going to be low, because you're not demonstrating to me as the marker that you understand what James is talking about. Because what you're saying is it shows, or you're not really be clear about what shows is. Whereas the second sentence uses the word demonstrates, which sends a very different message. So it's about the words which we're using in these sentences. So James 2020 demonstrates the claims that the moon is square. So somewhere within his paper he visualized different claims to show or prove or disprove the moon is square. So that word demonstrates is really important. And underneath there I've highlighted some additional words such as illustrate. Now illustrate refers to a drawing, whereas demonstrates might be a mathematical equation, or it might be an analysis leading to a justification. So the words which we're using are really important. The takeaway message from this slide is, do not use the word shows. Rather, use an accurate specific word such as demonstrates, illustrates, or identifies. The third example I want to talk about is the use of the word state or stating. Essentially, if you use that word, you are saying you're going to copy word for word from somebody else's work, in which case you must have the quote symbols. Without those quote symbols, you will be plagiarizing, because we need to know exactly which words you have copied. And at university level, on a final year project for computing, and I'm talking about computing now, it's not really acceptable for you to be directly quoting other people in this way. The reason you would directly quote an author in this way is if they're saying something which, if you write in your own words, will lose some underlining intent within that statement which you've quoted. So really, within your entire final year project, I might only see one, maybe two direct quotes, because if you change those quotes into your own words, it will lose its meaning. Otherwise, it should just be you paraphrasing what somebody else has said. So that's really important. The next thing I want to talk about in this example is the word contradicts. I'll just highlight that. There we go. The word contradicts is a signal, it's a signpost to the reader. It says the opposite. And these words within your writing are really, really important, because it tells the reader that what's about to follow is opposite to what I've just said, or it supports what I've just said. And that's really important because it helps the reader to maintain that reader's flow. What would it look like in a final year project for computing? It will look like the second example. So James 2020 argues that the moon is square, which contradicts Campbell 2019. That is a much better writing style than the first sentence. Of course, you can have different words, such as justifies or demonstrates. You don't have to use the word argue. But that same writing style, that same use of language, those specific words are really important. So there's two things to take away from this example. First is, do not use the word state. And the second is, use very specific words which indicate an intent. For example, you've got your argue, your justifies, your demonstrates, and of course there is your contradicts. So it signals the opposite to what I've just said. So the fourth example is basically what I refer to as undefined time. It's when a student makes a statement and they haven't defined a timescale for that. So the first two sentences, the start of sentence 1, it says nowadays, and in the start of sentence 2, it says in recent years. If we think about nowadays and in recent years, if I asked a student at primary school what they mean by nowadays, they might think this year, maybe next year, or maybe the past 2 years. If I ask somebody at university, just about to leave, at 21, their perception of recent years and nowadays is going to be very different. And then if I ask somebody my age, and I'm old, what do I interpret nowadays and recent years as being, it's probably going to be very different. Again, because to me, recent years is probably about 10 years. Nowadays, it's probably about the same. But I've quite a hard way of looking at this, because when I read a sentence like that, it tells me that the person who's writing this has no idea about the research. They haven't read the research, they don't understand the research, because if they did, they would not use those words. They would not use nowadays. They would not use in recent years. So what should you write? The last two sentences on this slide demonstrate how you should approach this time frame, if you will. The third sentence says research has settled accepting that the moon is square, and then I've cited 3 different papers, and if you look at the dates, they're all in the same time frame, so 2019 and 2020. So I'm saying in 2020 the research has accepted that the moon is square. So that's my time frame. In 5 years from now, that that research settlement might have changed, and it's now uneven again because somebody's brought a new analysis out and it is discovered something which we haven't considered before. So in 2025 it may be unsettled. And then the fourth example is between 2015 and 2019. So this is that time frame. So instead of putting nowadays, I've put 2015 and 2019. If you write one of those last two sentences, so sentence 3 and sentence 4, you're going to get good marks because you've been explicitly clear about what you mean by time frame. If you write the first two sentences, you're going to get a pass grade because it doesn't demonstrate to me that you understand the research. So the take-home message from the slide is do not write ambiguous timeframes. Do not write nowadays or in recent years. Rather, provide actual dates. Example 5. This is another example which really annoys me, is this ambiguous use of size. So here in sentence 1 we've got this huge increase, and then in sentence 2 we've got massive increase. What do they actually mean? Huge increase in internet usage. It means nothing. It says that you are aware that there's been an increase in internet usage. It tells me as your marker that you don't actually know any values around that. It tells me as a marker that you've not read any research looking at the internet usage. It tells me as a marker that you don't understand what's led to that increase in internet usage. So if you give these type of sentences within your final year project, you are going to get marked down because there's no academic robustness, there's no understanding of the research. At the bottom I've given a third sentence, and this is really what it should look like. So between 2015 and 2019 there was a 45% increase in broadband usage. So we've now got a time frame. We can see that was a 45% increase, so that's that huge or massive increase in broadband usage. Why is this important? Because it's supporting the market placement of the Internet of Things devices within the home, which is what we're talking about in the wider paragraph. However, this will give you good marks, but it wouldn't give you top marks because we're not dived into what we mean by broadband usage. Because although there's a 45% increase in broadband usage, is that mobile usage or is that landline usage? And there's a very different reason for using those two different types of broadband when we think about the Internet of Things. If we talk about devices within the home, most of those devices will be connected via landline. Very few will be using a router which uses a 5G SIM card. And that's a really important distinction to make. So if you want higher marks, you're going to have to start breaking down some of these values and investigating what they actually mean, opposed to just regurgitating the headline figure in the piece of work you've read. So the take-home message is, do not use ambiguous words like huge and massive. Use specific numbers from research, such as a 45% increase. If you want good marks, then you need to break down what that number actually represents. In terms of a summary, I just want to quickly talk about these 3 points of interest. So the key words, those accurate use of words, and I suggested things like illustrate, demonstrate, identify rather than show. I also said use words like investigate, analyze, explore to show that you understand what the author is doing, and that helps you with that academic robustness. I talked about integrating Harvard referencing within this sentence, and there's the Harvard referencing part. And then I talked about how the use of words within the sentence, so remember huge, massive, nowadays, in recent years, that use of accurate language, again, links to academic robustness. And then I talked about the signaling words, the words we use to signal to the reader what's going to happen next. So, however, on the other hand, contradict. Those words are telling the reader that we're about to present a alternative argument, or we might have support, which tells the reader that the next part of the sentence or the next sentence is supporting the previous sentence. So by bringing these two elements together, the words and the references together, we are thinking about the structure which we're using, and therefore that triangulation idea.